Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the orbital command station, watching her entire fleet die. Not from enemy fire, not from battle, but from silence. One by one, the green dots on her display turned red. 200 warships, the pride of humanity's Terran coalition, went dark in less than 10 minutes. The Kethran sovereignty had done something no one thought possible. They had killed every modern ship humanity owned, without firing a single shot. How? Vasquez asked her communications officer. Some kind of pulse weapon, ma'am. It corrupted every quantum computer core in the fleet. The AI systems are gone. Navigation is dead. Even basic power management isn't responding. Vasquez felt her stomach drop. The Kethran fleet would arrive at the Meridian Gate in 48 hours. That jump point was the doorway to Earth and 50 other human colonies. If the Kethran took it, the war was over. What do we have left? She asked. Nothing, Commander. Everything built after 2700 is dead in space. I didn't ask what we lost, Lieutenant. I asked what we have left. The young officer looked confused for a moment, then started typing on his console. His eyes went wide. Ma'am, there are some vessels in the museum orbital yards, and some old ships in the scrap yards near Titan. They're all from before 2700. They don't have quantum cores or modern AI. Vasquez felt a tiny spark of hope. Get me Admiral Chen, now. 20 minutes later, a gray-haired man appeared on her screen. Chen looked like he had just woken up from sleep. He was 70 years old and had retired 5 years ago. Commander Vasquez, I saw the news. Bad business with the fleet. Admiral, I need you back in service. Right now. Chen raised an eyebrow. Elena, I'm too old to... I need someone who knows how to fly the old ships, the pre-2700 vessels. Chen went quiet. Then he started to smile. You want to use the museum fleet? I want to use anything that can fly and shoot. Give me 6 hours. I'll meet you at the Neptune yards. Vasquez spent those 6 hours making calls she never thought she would make. She contacted museum directors, scrapyard owners, and retirement homes for old naval officers. By the time she reached Neptune, she had a list of 47 ships that might work. The Neptune yards looked like a graveyard. Old destroyers floated between the structures covered in dust and memory. Chen was already there, walking through the old dreadnought Indomitable. The ship had fought in the Proxima War 60 years ago. Now it was supposed to be a tourist attraction. Can we make them work? Vasquez asked. Chen ran his hand along a control panel. Everything was physical. Buttons and switches instead of holographic displays. These ships are simple. Fusion drives, not quantum engines. Manual targeting instead of AI prediction. Physical ammunition, not energy weapons. The Kethran pulse won't affect them at all. But can we fight with them? That depends. How many people do you have who remember how to do things the old way? Vasquez had found 200 retired officers and crew. Most were over 50. They had trained on these old systems before the modern fleet replaced everything. She also had 300 young crew members from the disabled modern ships. They knew nothing about manual controls. Chen looked at the list and nodded. It'll have to be enough. Let's wake these old birds up. The next 30 hours were chaos. Engineers pulled ships from museums and scrap yards. They replaced old fuel cells and patched hull breaches. Weapons that hadn't fired in decades were tested. Some exploded. Most worked. Lieutenant Marcus Ramos was one of the young officers assigned to the old destroyer Relentless. He stood on the bridge and stared at the controls. Everything was wrong. No holographic display showing enemy positions. No AI calculating firing solutions. Just analog screens and physical switches. I don't understand any of this, he said. Chief Engineer Kowalski looked up from a panel. She was 60 years old and had served on ships like this as a young woman. What don't you understand, Lieutenant? How do we target without AI? How do we navigate without quantum processors? With your eyes and your brain, like humans did for hundreds of years. But that's so slow. Slow and working beats fast and dead, Kowalski said. Now help me reroute power to the railgun. We've got 6 hours before the Catherine arrive. Chen gathered all the captains in the Indomitable's briefing room. It felt strange to Vasquez, sitting in a room that was actually inside the ship instead of appearing as a hologram. Everything here was real and solid. Listen carefully, Chen said. We have 47 ships against a Catherine fleet of 200. Every single one of their vessels is better than ours in almost every way. They're faster. Their shields are stronger. Their weapons hit harder. The room went quiet. Then Chen smiled. But they've never fought anything like us. The Catherine tactical computers are designed to fight modern human warfare. They expect energy weapons, drone swarms, and predictive AI. They haven't seen kinetic railguns or nuclear missiles in combat for 50 years. Their shields might not even be calibrated correctly for our weapons. And if that's not enough, someone asked. Then we improvise, Chen said. That's what these old ships were built for. Human thinking. Human decisions. No AI to make everything predictable. We're going to be chaos itself, and chaos is something their computers can't predict. Vasquez stood up. The Catherine are calling us the Ember Fleet. They think we're the last dying sparks of humanity. Let's show them that embers can still burn. 47 old warships moved into position around the Meridian Gate. Their hulls were scratched and old. Their systems were simple and outdated, but every single one of them had a human crew ready to fight. In the distance, sensors picked up the Catherine fleet jumping into the system. 200 modern warships against 47 antiques. Vasquez sat in the captain's chair of the Indomitable and smiled. All ships, this is Commander Vasquez. Remember your training, trust your eyes, and show them why humanity still holds the stars. The battle was about to begin. The first Catherine scout ships arrived 3 hours before the main fleet. They were small, fast vessels designed to scan enemy positions and report back. Their sensors swept across the Meridian Gate and found exactly what they expected to find. Nothing. Then one of the scouts exploded. The Catherine commander on the lead scout ship stared at his display in confusion. The explosion had come from nowhere. No energy signature, no warning, just a sudden impact and then debris. "What hit us?" he demanded. "Unknown, Commander, scanning for—" Another scout exploded, then a third. "Evasive maneuvers, find the source." On the bridge of the destroyer Relentless, Lieutenant Ramos was shaking. He had just fired the railgun for the first time in combat. The weapon used no energy beams or plasma. It simply threw a chunk of tungsten metal at incredible speed. Old technology. Simple technology. "Did I hit it?" he asked. Chief Kowalski checked the scopes. "You blew it into pieces, kid. Now reload and find another target." Ramos looked at the manual targeting system. He had to actually aim the weapon himself. His training had always relied on AI to do this work. Now he had to judge distance, speed, and trajectory with his own brain. It felt impossible. "I can't do this," he said. "You just did it," Kowalski replied. "Now do it again." The Catherine scouts retreated after losing 5 ships. They had never encountered weapons like this. Their shield systems were designed to deflect or absorb energy, but these were physical projectiles moving at extreme speeds. The shields barely slowed them down. Admiral Chen watched the scouts flee and allowed himself a small smile. "They're confused. Good. Confusion is our friend." Vasquez stood beside him on the bridge of the Indomitable. "They'll report back to their main fleet. Then they'll come in force." "Yes, and they'll be angry. Angry enemies make mistakes." The Catherine main fleet arrived 6 hours later. 180 warships dropped out of jump space in perfect formation. They were beautiful vessels, all smooth curves and glowing engines. They made the human ships look like scrap metal by comparison. The Catherine fleet commander opened a communication channel. His species looked almost like humans, but with blue-tinted skin and larger eyes. He spoke through a translator. "Human vessels, you are ordered to withdraw from the Meridian Gate. Your fleet is destroyed. You cannot win this fight. Leave now, and we will allow you to retreat with honor." Vasquez took a deep breath before responding. "Catherine, Commander, this is Elena Vasquez of the Terran Coalition. We're not going anywhere. The Meridian Gate belongs to humanity. If you want it, you'll have to take it." The Catherine commander looked almost sad. "You fight with museum pieces. We count 47 vessels. We have 180. This is not courage, Commander. This is suicide." "Maybe, but it's our choice to make." The communication ended. The Catherine fleet began to advance. Chen immediately started giving orders. "All ships, scatter formation. No patterns. No predictable movements. Make them target each ship individually." The old human vessels broke apart, each one moving in a different direction. The Catherine tactical computers tried to predict their movements and failed. There was no pattern to analyze, just 47 captains making 47 different decisions. The first exchange of fire was brutal. Catherine plasma lances reached out and touched 3 human destroyers. They died in seconds, their old shields unable to handle that much energy. But the human ships fired back with everything they had. Railguns threw metal slugs. Missile tubes launched nuclear-tipped warheads that hadn't been used in modern combat for decades. A Catherine cruiser took a direct hit from a missile and its shields flickered. The ship survived, but barely. The Catherine commander was confused. These primitive weapons shouldn't be this effective. His shields should have absorbed them easily. What he didn't know was that his shields had been designed and calibrated based on modern human tactics. No one had tested them against old kinetic weapons in 50 years. On the Relentless, Ramos was starting to understand. He watched the Catherine ships move and realized something. They were too perfect, too predictable. Their movements followed patterns that their AI calculated as optimal. "Chief, I think I can predict where they'll be." Kowalski looked at him. "Because their AI is doing the thinking?" "Exactly. Watch that cruiser. It's going to move left in 3 seconds to maintain optimal firing position." The cruiser moved left. Ramos fired the railgun at the space where it would be, not where it was. The tungsten slug hit the cruiser's engine section. It didn't destroy the ship, but it knocked the vessel out of formation. "Nice shot, kid," Kowalski said. Vasquez was fighting the battle from the Indomitable, coordinating all 47 ships through old-fashioned radio communication. No quantum network. No instant data sharing. Just voices and trust. "Destroyer Group 3, I need you to draw their attention, make noise, make them chase you." "Understood, Commander. We're lighting up like fireworks." 3 destroyers roared past a Catherine battleship, firing every weapon they had. The shots mostly bounced off the shields, but they got the battleship's attention. It turned to pursue, taking it out of position. That's when the Indomitable and 4 other heavy ships appeared from behind a piece of orbital debris. They had been hiding in silent running mode, something only old ships could do. Modern vessels always had some kind of active sensor running. The Dreadnought's main guns fired at point-blank range. Massive shells slammed into the Catherine battleship's rear section, where the shields were weakest. The battleship's engines exploded. It was dead in space. The Catherine fleet pulled back, and Vasquez felt a moment of hope. Then she saw the numbers. She had started with 47 ships. Now she had 41. The Catherine had lost 8 vessels, but still had 172. Chen put a hand on her shoulder. "We're still here. That's what matters. We can't keep trading losses like this. We won't. They're learning that we're dangerous, but we're learning too. We're learning how they think, how their computers make decisions." A message came in from the Galactic Council, the organization that supposedly kept peace between species. It was a formal demand that humanity surrender the Meridian Gate to avoid further bloodshed. Vasquez read it and felt anger rise in her chest. They want us to surrender? After we've bled for this position? Politics, Chen said. The council doesn't like unpredictable situations. We're being unpredictable. What should I tell them? Tell them we're busy. Tell them we'll talk after we win. Ramos appeared on Vasquez's communication screen. His face was dirty, and he looked exhausted, but his eyes were bright. Commander, I think I've figured out their tactical pattern. Their AI makes decisions based on optimal positioning and maximum efficiency. If we can force them into positions that seem good, but are actually traps, we can use their own computers against them. Vasquez finished. Lieutenant, get some sleep. Then I want you and Admiral Chen to work on this. If we can predict them better than they can predict us, we might just have a chance. The Kethrin fleet held position 5,000 kilometers away. They were regrouping, analyzing what had happened. Their commander couldn't understand how primitive human vessels had caused this much damage. On the Indomitable, Vasquez looked at her remaining ships. 41 vessels, hundreds of dead crew members. But they still held the Meridian Gate. All ships, she broadcast. Rest and repair. The real battle hasn't started yet. Admiral Chen sat in the old briefing room with Lieutenant Ramos and 5 other young officers. Between them lay dozens of paper charts. Actual paper, something most of them had only seen in museums. Chen had insisted on using physical maps instead of holographic displays. Look at this, Chen said, spreading out a chart of the Meridian Gate region. The gate sits in the middle of a gravitational anomaly. These eddies here and here are dangerous. Modern ship computers automatically avoid them. Why would we want to go near them? Asked one of the officers. Because the Kethrin computers will avoid them too. They'll expect us to avoid them. It makes these areas perfect for ambushes. Ramos studied the chart. The manual doctrine. We do things that computers would never choose to do. Exactly. We take risks. We make choices that seem inefficient or dangerous. We become unpredictable. Chen spent the next 12 hours teaching the young officers everything he knew about pre-AI warfare, visual targeting, manual navigation, analog fire control, all the skills that had been forgotten when computers took over. Meanwhile, Chief Kowalski was leading a team of engineers through a different kind of revolution. They were stripping parts from the damaged ships and using them to retrofit the survivors. "What are you doing with that missile launcher?" one of her assistants asked. "Making it stupid," Kowalski replied. "Modern missiles have guidance systems, smart targeting. The Kethrin point defense computers can track and destroy them easily. But if we remove the guidance systems and just launch them ballistically, the Kethrin computers won't know what to do. They're not programmed to handle dumb missiles." "But how will we hit anything?" "The old way. We aim really, really carefully. On the relentless." Ramos was training his crew on manual targeting. They spent hours practicing on asteroids, learning to judge distance and speed without computer assistance. It was frustrating work. They missed more than they hit at first. But slowly, something changed. The crew started to understand the weapons. They began to feel the rhythm of combat in a way that AI assistants had never taught them. It wasn't about perfect accuracy. It was about human judgment and instinct. Vasquez was facing a different battle. The Galactic Council was demanding she attend a hearing. They wanted to know why humanity was provoking the Kethrin with primitive aggression. She took the video call from her quarters on the Indomitable. 5 alien species appeared on her screen, all looking concerned or annoyed. "Commander Vasquez," said the council speaker, a tall being from the Velen species. "You must understand the position you're putting us all in. The Kethrin have legitimate territorial claims. Your resistance is causing an escalation." "They destroyed our fleet with a sneak attack," Vasquez said flatly. "That doesn't sound like a legitimate claim. The Meridian Gate has strategic value to many species. Perhaps it would be better to negotiate." "No." The council members looked shocked. One of them, a reptilian Sarath, leaned forward. You would risk war rather than negotiate? We're already at war. The Kethryn started it. We're just not willing to lose it. With obsolete vessels? Commander, please be reasonable. These obsolete vessels destroyed 8 Kethryn ships and drove off their fleet. I'd say they're working pretty well. The Velen speaker sighed. If you continue this path, we cannot guarantee Council support for human territorial claims. Then don't. We'll take care of ourselves. Vasquez ended the call. Her hands were shaking. She had just defied the entire Galactic Council, but she meant every word. Humanity would not surrender its position. Chen appeared at her door a moment later. I heard about the Council. They think we should give up. Of course they do. They've forgotten what it's like to fight for something. They've relied on the Council to keep peace for so long that they don't understand war anymore. Have we made a mistake? Are we being too stubborn? Chen shook his head. No, you made the only choice that matters. You chose to stand. Now let's make sure that choice counts for something. 3 days after the first battle, the Kethryn sent a supply convoy toward their fleet. It was guarded by only 12 escort ships. They believed the area was secure. Vasquez saw the opportunity immediately. Admiral, can we intercept them? Chen studied the charts. Yes, but we'll have to use silent running to get close. No active sensors, no communications, just visual contact between ships. How do we coordinate without communication? We plan everything beforehand, then we trust our captains to follow the plan. They selected 8 destroyers for the mission. Each captain received their orders in person. No electronic communication that could be intercepted. They would approach the convoy using the gravitational eddies as cover, then strike from 3 directions at once. Ramos was given command of the Relentless for this mission. It was his first time leading a ship in combat. He felt terrified and excited at the same time. The 8 destroyers moved through space in complete silence. No radar pings, no engine emissions. Just cold metal drifting on momentum. It was something only old ships could do effectively. Modern vessels always had some system running that created a detectable signature. They waited in the shadow of a large asteroid as the Kethryn convoy approached. Ramos watched through the optical scopes, actually seeing the enemy with his eyes instead of on a computer display. It felt primitive and strange, and somehow right. The moment came. 8 destroyers erupted from hiding, their engines suddenly roaring to life. The Kethryn escorts scrambled to respond, but they had been caught completely off guard. Ramos fired everything, rail guns, missiles, even the old-fashioned laser turrets that barely worked. The Relentless tore into a Kethryn escort from the side, where its shields were weakest. The escort tried to turn and face them, but Ramos had already moved to a new position. The battle lasted 9 minutes. 8 human destroyers against 12 Kethryn escorts and a convoy of supply ships. When it was over, all 12 escorts were destroyed or disabled, and the supply ships were drifting helplessly. The 8 destroyers returned to the fleet with no losses. They had also captured 2 supply vessels full of ammunition and reactor fuel. It was a complete victory. The Kethryn fleet commander watched the footage of the ambush and felt something he rarely felt: doubt. These humans weren't fighting like any enemy he had studied. They took insane risks. They used obsolete tactics. They made decisions that no computer would approve, and it was working. He called his tactical officers together. We need to change our approach. These humans are unpredictable. Their ships are primitive, but their tactics are adaptive. Should we request reinforcements? One officer asked. No. That would be admitting weakness. We have sufficient forces to crush them. We just need to stop trying to predict them and start overwhelming them with pure force. Back on the Indomitable, Vasquez gathered all her captains. The Kethryn are going to change their tactics. They're going to stop being careful and start being aggressive. When they come at us next time, they'll come with everything. Chen nodded. Then we need to be ready to give them the fight of their lives. We have 39 ships left, Vasquez said. They have 170. The odds aren't good. The odds were never good, Chen replied. But we're still here, and as long as we're here, we're winning. Ramos stood at the back of the room. He thought about how scared he had been just days ago, how he had doubted everything about these old ships and old ways. Now he understood. These vessels weren't obsolete. They were pure. No AI to second guess. No computers to make decisions. Just human beings making human choices. That night, Vasquez couldn't sleep. She walked through the corridors of the Indomitable, looking at the old systems and manual controls. Everything here required human attention, human skill, human courage. She stopped at a window and looked out at the fleet. 39 ships, battered and old, holding the line against an enemy that should have crushed them days ago. "We're not obsolete," she whispered to herself. "We're exactly what we need to be." In the distance, sensors detected movement. The Catherine fleet was forming up. The real battle was about to begin. The Catherine fleet came at dawn, if you could call it dawn in the darkness of space. 170 warships arranged in a massive wall of metal and energy. They weren't being clever anymore. They weren't trying to outsmart the humans. They were simply going to crush them through overwhelming force. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, next to Vasquez. "Here they come." "All ships," Vasquez broadcast. "This is it. Everything we've learned. Everything we've practiced. Today we prove that humanity doesn't need permission to hold its place among the stars." The human fleet of 39 ships spread out in a formation that would have made any modern tactical computer scream in protest. There was no obvious pattern, no clear defensive line. Just ships positioned in ways that felt right to their captains. The Catherine opened fire first. Plasma lances reached across the void, brilliant and deadly. 2 human frigates died immediately, their shields overwhelmed. But the human ships were already moving, scattering in 39 different directions. The Catherine tactical computer tried to assign targets. It tried to predict where the human ships would go next. But every prediction failed. One ship dove toward the Meridian Gates Corona. Another accelerated directly at the Catherine formation. A third seemed to be running away, then suddenly turned and fired from an impossible angle. "Fire at will," Chen ordered. "No patterns. Make your own choices." The old human weapons spoke with voices the galaxy had almost forgotten. Railguns threw solid metal at relativistic speeds. Nuclear missiles traced paths across the dark, and in some cases, ships simply rammed Catherine vessels, trading their lives for enemy kills. Lieutenant Ramos on the Relentless was fighting the battle of his life. His training had taught him to follow AI recommendations. Now he had to trust his own eyes and instincts. A Catherine cruiser was targeting him. His computer would have told him to evade at maximum thrust. Instead, Ramos did something crazy. He turned toward the cruiser and fired every missile he had while accelerating directly at the enemy ship. The Catherine point defense systems destroyed most of the missiles, but 3 got through. They struck the cruiser's forward shields and detonated. The shields didn't fail, but they flickered. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Ramos to fire the railgun through the gap. The tungsten slug punched into the cruiser's hull and tore through 3 decks before exiting the other side. The cruiser was still alive, but it was bleeding atmosphere and fire. It fell back from the formation. "Did you see that?" Kowalski shouted. "That's how we do it!" But the victory was small compared to the larger battle. Human ships were dying. Vasquez watched the display as green dots turned red. 4 ships gone. 6 ships. 10 ships. "We can't sustain this," she said. Chen was studying the battle with the eyes of someone who had fought in wars before computers made everything clean and calculated. "Look at their formation. They're staying together. Their tactical computer is keeping them in a defensive cluster. So what? So we need to break them apart. Make them fight as individuals instead of as a fleet. Chen grabbed the communication channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. I'm about to do something very stupid. I need 6 destroyers to follow me. Everyone else be ready to exploit the opening." Before Vasquez could ask what he meant, the Indomitable suddenly accelerated. The old dreadnought, built for different age of warfare, pushed its fusion engines to maximum. 6 destroyers followed, matching the flagship's insane charge. They were heading directly into the Meridian Gate's corona, the gravitational distortion that surrounded the jump point. Modern ship computers would never allow this. The eddies and gravity waves could tear a vessel apart. But these weren't modern ships. The Indomitable and its escorts dove into the corona like birds diving into a storm. Gravity pulled at them from multiple directions. The ships bucked and twisted. On the bridge, Vasquez grabbed onto a railing as the vessel shook violently. "Chen, you're insane!" she shouted. "Probably," he laughed. "But look where we're going." The 7 ships emerged from the corona directly behind the Kethrin fleet. The enemy formation had been designed to face forward. Their heavy shields and weapons pointed toward where they expected the humans to be. Their rear sections were more lightly protected. The Indomitable's main guns fired at point-blank range. They were old-fashioned cannons, huge barrels that used chemical explosions to launch shells the size of small vehicles. The shells crashed into the Kethrin flagship's engines. The first shell shattered the shields. The second shell destroyed the main reactor. The Kethrin flagship died in a brilliant explosion that lit up the battlefield. The 6 destroyers spread out, firing into the rear of the Kethrin formation. Ships that had been positioned to fight humans in front of them suddenly had enemies behind them. The formation broke apart as vessels tried to turn and face the new threat. That's when the rest of the human fleet struck from the front. Vasquez had used Chen's insane maneuver to position her remaining ships perfectly. They hit the confused Kethrin fleet like hammers, concentrating fire on individual targets. A Kethrin battleship took hits from 4 different directions and exploded. A cruiser found itself isolated and was torn apart by focused railgun fire. Ramos saw his opportunity. A Kethrin destroyer was trying to retreat from the chaos. It was damaged and its shields were failing. He brought the Relentless alongside and fired every weapon that still worked. "For Earth!" he shouted, surprising himself with the raw emotion in his voice. The Kethrin destroyer broke in half. But the cost was terrible. Chen's bold strike had worked, but 3 of his 6 escorts were destroyed in the attack. The Indomitable itself was damaged, trailing atmosphere and fire. Across the battlefield, human ships were dying. The fleet that had started with 39 vessels now had only 23. The Kethrin fleet was in chaos, but they still had numbers. 130 ships remained, and they were regrouping. Then Kowalski's modifications made the difference. She had been working on a crazy idea for days. The old fusion reactors on these ancient ships had safety systems that limited their output. But those safety systems could be overridden. For just a few seconds, a fusion reactor could produce massive amounts of power. "All ships," Kowalski broadcast. "I'm sending you a manual override sequence. It'll give you a huge power spike, but only for 10 seconds. Use it on your shields or weapons, but not both. After 10 seconds, you'll need to shut down and restart your reactor." "That's insane," someone replied. "The reactor could explode." "It might," Kowalski agreed, "but it'll probably work. Probably." Vasquez made the decision instantly. "All ships, use the override on my mark. Target your nearest enemy and give them everything." The remaining human ships charged forward one last time. As they closed with the Kethrin fleet, Vasquez gave the order. "Mark!" 23 human ships suddenly blazed with power. Some directed it all into their shields, making them shine like stars. Others pushed everything into their weapons, making their railguns fire twice as fast and their missiles burn twice as hot. The Kethrin shield systems were designed to handle steady energy levels. They weren't prepared for sudden massive spikes from ships that should have been nearly dead. Shields that should have held failed. Weapons that should have bounced off tore through hulls. In 10 seconds of furious combat, the humans destroyed 18 Kethran ships. Then the human reactors started shutting down. Ships went dark as they emergency restarted their power systems. For 60 terrible seconds, they were defenseless. But the Kethran had had enough. Their flagship was destroyed. Their formation was shattered. They had lost over 40 ships to an enemy that shouldn't have been able to fight at all. The remaining Kethran vessels began to jump away, retreating to their own space. Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched them go. She couldn't quite believe it. Did we win? Chen was sitting in the captain's chair, looking exhausted but triumphant. We held the gate. That's all that matters. The final count was devastating and glorious at the same time. Humanity had started the battle with 39 ships. 23 had been destroyed. 16 remained, all of them damaged. Some were barely functional, but the Meridian Gate was still theirs. The Kethran had lost their flagship and 43 vessels. They had retreated in disarray. Ramos sat in the captain's chair of the Relentless, his hands still shaking from adrenaline. His crew was exhausted and wounded, but they were alive. They had survived. We did it, he whispered. We actually did it. Kowalski appeared on his screen, her face covered in grease and burns. Kid, I just want you to know that you're completely crazy. Flying directly at a cruiser? What were you thinking? I was thinking like a human instead of a computer. Good answer. Now help me restart this reactor before we drift into an asteroid. Vasquez broadcast to all surviving ships. This is Commander Vasquez. I don't have words for what you've accomplished today. You took ships that the galaxy had forgotten and turned them into legends. You faced impossible odds and held the line. Humanity is still here because you refused to surrender. Rest now. We've earned it. Outside the hull, the stars shone unchanged. But something had changed in the galaxy today. Humanity had fought with obsolete vessels and won. They had proven that human courage and creativity could overcome any technological disadvantage. The throne among the stars still belonged to them. 3 weeks after the Battle of Meridian Gate, Elena Vasquez stood before the Galactic Council. But this time, she wasn't taking their calls from the bridge of a damaged warship. She was there in person, standing in the great chamber where representatives from 40 species gathered to discuss matters of peace and war. They were all staring at her. The Velen speaker looked uncomfortable. Commander Vasquez, the Council wishes to understand how your fleet achieved victory against overwhelming odds. Many species are concerned. Concerned that we won, Vasquez asked. Concerned about the implications. The Kethran fleet was equipped with modern weapons, advanced shields, and tactical AI. Your vessels were, by all accounts, obsolete. Yet you destroyed or disabled over 40 enemy ships while suffering significant losses yourselves. The Kethran have formally requested a ceasefire and are willing to negotiate territorial boundaries. A Sarath representative leaned forward. We need to know. How did you do it? Vasquez took a breath. She had prepared for this moment. We won because we didn't have all the advantages you mentioned. Our ships were simple, manual controls, physical weapons, human decision-making at every level. That makes no sense, another council member said. Superior technology should mean superior outcomes. Should it? Vasquez challenged. Your species, all of you, have spent centuries optimizing everything. You built computers to fight your battles, AI to make tactical decisions, predictive algorithms to counter enemy movements. You made everything efficient and perfect and predictable. She walked to the center of the chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as she could. The Kethran tactical computers were programmed based on modern warfare. They expected energy weapons at specific frequencies. They anticipated drone swarms and coordinated AI attacks. They prepared for every modern tactic in the database. But they never prepared for railguns and nuclear missiles. They never trained their systems to counter weapons that were abandoned 50 years ago. Their shields were calibrated wrong. Their tactics assumed a level of precision and coordination that AI provides. When faced with pure human chaos, their computers couldn't adapt fast enough. The chamber was silent. Finally, a representative from the Morian Compact spoke. His species was known for their advanced technology. Are you suggesting that we've made ourselves vulnerable by advancing too far? I'm saying you've made yourself predictable. Your AI fights the way AI thinks, efficient, logical, optimal, but humans don't think that way. We take crazy risks. We make choices that no computer would approve. We improvise. The Velen speaker looked troubled. This could change the entire strategic balance of the galaxy. If obsolete technology can defeat modern systems through unpredictability, then maybe everyone needs to remember that technology is just a tool, Vasquez finished. What matters is the being using it. We didn't win because our ships were better. We won because our people were more adaptable. The Sarath representative stood up. Commander Vasquez, your victory has created a problem. The Kethrin are demanding that the Council establish new rules of warfare. They claim your tactics were barbaric. Vasquez felt anger flash through her. Barbaric? They attacked us first. They destroyed our modern fleet with a sneak weapon. We fought with what we had left. Nevertheless, there are concerns. Several council members believe that allowing such primitive tactics sets a dangerous precedent. Then they can take their concerns and... Vasquez stopped herself. She took a breath. I'm sorry, but humanity will not apologize for surviving. We will not apologize for winning. If the Council wants to create rules that favor technological superiority over tactical flexibility, that's your choice. But don't expect us to follow them. Back at the Meridian Gate, Admiral Chen was overseeing repairs to the surviving ships. The Indomitable was in the worst shape. Half its systems were destroyed, and it would take months to make the old dreadnought fully operational again. But Chen refused to scrap any of the survivors. Each one had earned its place in history. Lieutenant Ramos walked through the shipyards, looking at the old vessels with new eyes. The Relentless was docked nearby, being repaired by teams of engineers. He had been offered a transfer to a modern ship once the Terran Coalition's quantum cores were restored and repaired. He had declined. I want to stay with the Ember Fleet, he had told his superiors. These ships may be old, but they taught me more about real combat in 3 weeks than 5 years of modern training. Chief Kowalski found him standing in front of the Relentless. Admiring your ship, Lieutenant? Just thinking about everything that happened. We shouldn't have won, Chief. But we did. You know why? Because those fancy Kethrin ships had a fatal flaw. They were too smart. They thought they knew everything. Our ships are dumb. They do exactly what we tell them, nothing more. And sometimes, dumb and reliable beats smart and predictable. The Terran Coalition was making changes across the entire fleet. They were restoring their modern ships, but they were also keeping the Ember Fleet operational. A new division was created, officially called the Irregular Fleet, but still known as the Ember Fleet to everyone who mattered. Young officers were being trained in manual systems. Older veterans were being brought out of retirement to teach the forgotten skills. Humanity was learning that having 2 ways to fight was better than having one perfect way. Other species in the galaxy were watching carefully. Some were dismissive, calling the human victory a fluke. But others were quietly pulling old ships out of storage, wondering if they too had made themselves vulnerable by relying too heavily on AI and modern systems. The Kethrin formally sued for peace 6 weeks after the battle. They agreed to withdraw their claims on the Meridian Gate and established new borders that both sides could accept. In private communications, Kethrin military analysts admitted they had no effective counter to the human chaos doctrine. Vasquez returned to the Meridian Gate to find her fleet restored and reorganized. The 16 surviving ships had been repaired. New crews had been assigned. and to her surprise, the Indomitable was ready for service. Chen was waiting for her on the bridge. "Welcome back, Commander. Or should I say, Admiral?" Vasquez looked at him in confusion. "What?" "The Coalition promoted you. You're in charge of the entire Ember fleet now. They're making it permanent. 40 vessels total, all pre-2700 technology. Our job is to train crews in manual warfare and to serve as an unpredictable element in any future conflict. They're actually keeping us? Not just keeping us, expanding us. Turns out, having a fleet that can fight without quantum cores or AI is useful when enemies keep trying to disable modern technology. We're insurance against the next surprise attack." Vasquez sat in the captain's chair and looked around the old bridge. Everything here was manual, analog, simple, and proven. Ramos appeared on the communication screen from the Relentless. "Admiral Vasquez, the irregular fleet is ready for inspection." She smiled at the title. "From lieutenant to commander to admiral in 6 weeks. Thank you, Captain Ramos. Tell the fleet to stand ready. We have patrol duties starting tomorrow." Over the next months, the Ember fleet became something between a legend and a practical necessity. When dignitaries visited, they wanted to see the ships that had defeated a modern fleet. When young officers graduated, the best were offered positions in the irregular fleet. And when enemies considered attacking human territory, they had to account for the possibility of facing the unpredictable humans in their obsolete vessels. 1 year after the battle, Vasquez gathered all 40 ships for a memorial service. They assembled around a monument built at the Meridian Gate, a structure listing the names of every crew member who had died defending the position. "We lost 23 ships," Vasquez said to the assembled crews. 317 people. They fought with weapons the galaxy had forgotten. They flew ships that museums had discarded. And they held the line when no one else believed they could. The galaxy called us obsolete. They said we were relics of a bygone age. But we proved something important. We proved that humans don't need permission to hold our place among the stars. We don't need the newest technology or the most advanced AI. What we need is courage, creativity, and the willingness to adapt. Chen stood beside her, looking at the monument. They also proved something else. They proved that chaos, real human chaos, is more powerful than any perfect system, because perfect systems have perfect weaknesses. But chaos is unpredictable. Chaos is human. Ramos listened from the bridge of the Relentless, feeling pride swell in his chest. He had started this journey terrified of manual systems and uncertain of his abilities. Now he commanded a destroyer in the most respected fleet in human space. "Admiral," he reported, "all ships acknowledge. The Ember fleet stands ready." Vasquez looked out at the 40 vessels, each one a piece of history brought back to life. They were old, they were simple, they were unpredictable, they were human. "Then let's get to work," she said. "The galaxy isn't going to protect itself." The Ember fleet moved out from the Meridian Gate, spreading across human space on patrol. They were no longer fighting for survival. Now they fought to remind everyone, human and alien alike, that humanity held its throne among the stars not because of superior technology, but because of superior spirit. In the great archives of the Galactic Council, historians recorded the Battle of Meridian Gate as a turning point. The day when one species proved that advancement wasn't just about newer technology. It was about remembering what made you strong in the first place. And for humanity, what made them strong was simple. They refused to give up. They adapted to any situation. They thrived in chaos. They turned weakness into strength and obsolete into legendary. The throne among the stars was still theirs, not because they had the best ships or the most advanced weapons, but because when everything else failed, they had themselves. And that had always been enough. Years later, when young cadets asked Vasquez about the battle, She always gave them the same answer. We won, because we remembered something the galaxy had forgotten. Technology serves people. People don't serve technology. The moment you forget that, you've already lost. The Ember Fleet continued its patrols, a reminder written in old metal and human courage. They were obsolete by every technical measure, but they were also proof that sometimes the old ways combined with human determination could achieve the impossible. And in a galaxy that had optimized everything, that made humanity more dangerous than any modern weapon ever could,